Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today I want to talk about how brokers like Schwab are stealing our AMC and APE shares, likely to give to those that haven't yet received their APE shares, and also to lend to those short sellers. So stay tuned and let's make some money. And I want to dive straight in with the key information. So, Lauren tweeted saying, guys, there's definitely an issue with Schwab and APE. On my cost basis tab, it's showing I only have 46 shares, which is the additional shares that I've bought. But all of the shares that were there originally are now gone. Lauren originally held over 200 AMC shares and therefore received 200 APE on the day of release. She then bought some additional shares and had a grand total of 246 shares. However, Schwab is now saying she only holds 46. And she said as an update, Schwab is now saying it will take 4 to 5 business days to get my original 200 plus APE shares back. Maybe Schwab additionally issued shares that they can't actually find. Schwab then issued an important notification saying the cost basis and number of shares held for AMC and APE may not be accurate at this time. This issue does not impact trading in these securities. They said we are working to resolve the issue as quickly as possible, and of course they apologise for any inconvenience. So therefore, Schwab have stolen these 200 shares and they've said, don't worry, you will get these shares back in 4 to 5 business days time after we've passed the parcel and lent these shares to short sellers. But you can still trade APE and sell your shares, of course. But again, it's not just Lauren. Cat Striker also tweeted saying, I also looked on my Schwab account under the cost basis tab and my shares were missing as well. On top of this, George Brown tweeted asking for some help from Adam Aaron. He said, my shares with Charles Schwab are gone and they have said they've reached out to you in regard to the cost basis, but my APE shares are gone. George also attached this video from the live chat over at Schwab. The Schwab representative originally confirmed that his APE shares were not showing, and he said correct $17,000 worth of shares are missing. The Schwab representative said, thank you for confirming, I will escalate this with our technical team. He said, at the moment, I don't actually know what's happening, but it could just be a temporary system issue, or there could be no cost basis for the APE shares and therefore they've disappeared. This seems to be a massively widespread issue affecting pretty much anyone with an account at Schwab. This user also tweeted saying Schwab is having issues with APE shares. My shares are also missing. He spoke to a rep and they said that Schwab may originally post or issue the shares, but then pull them or recall them due to new information from the DTCC. But clearly there's no issue with the newly purchased APE shares, just an issue with the originally issued APE. And as Lauren said, maybe it's because Schwab initially issued shares they couldn't find or initially issued IOUs and not actually real shares. Again, this just seems to be even more blatant proof of illegal manipulation of the APE dividend, and therefore Adam Aaron has more and more factual proof. And as Stick to Stocks tweeted, he said, yes, the FTDs for APE do matter. It simply means they aren't playing fair and they are manipulating the price. And he said it's one of several ways they make supply and demand an absolute joke, including dark pool abuse. And importantly, he says, because brokers will likely never show us the real numbers behind what retail truly holds in millions of brokerage accounts, and what nobody talks about enough is how many shares we own that must eventually be accounted for. He said, forget short covering, I'm talking about the massive issue with making supply a disaster. The fact that you can keep buying APE and AMC shares and these brokers will keep fulfilling your order and allow you to accumulate, in theory, an unlimited number of shares. Retail investors have been buying AMC and APE and GameStop shares on a daily basis for almost 2 years now, and we haven't sold a single share. As he points out, this likely means we've bought the float many times over and we likely own billions and billions of AMC shares. And he said, who exactly accounts for the overabundance of AMC and APE shares that shouldn't actually exist? And he said, what happens when the price escalates and the liquidity in the market is dry, but these brokers have been continually selling shares? He said, will brokers have to foot the bill, or will an institution or a hedge fund or the DTCC come to their rescue? And he said, these brokers know what's been happening and these brokers know there's way too many shares in our accounts. So what happens when the music stops? Guys, if you haven't already, be sure to sign up to Moomoo right now using the link in the description below. You can currently get 15 free shares with Moomoo when you sign up, worth up to a whopping $30,000 in total. And for Moomoo's latest customer agreement, they also state they do not accept payment for order flow. They officially state they do not sell your order flow to market makers like Citadel or to clearing houses like Apex Clearing. Therefore, Moomoo is brilliant for buying those AMC, those APE, and those GameStop shares. This is the Moomoo platform, which as you can see is incredibly customizable. They've got tons of technical indicators and advanced charting tools. George also tweeted saying, how could 14 million ape shares have been delivered on August 26th with a trading volume on that day of only 13.8 million shares? He said the numbers don't match and this is open fraud. Even if the numbers did match, buying 14 million shares should have sent the price skyrocketing. This screenshot is showing that between the 25th and 26th of August, the FTDs decreased by 14 million shares. However, on the 26th of August, there was only 13.8 million shares traded. Therefore, George is asking the question, how did 14 million FTDs be covered if there was only 13.8 million shares traded on that day? For example, even if all 13.8 million shares were buying orders from these institutions, not a single sell order and not a single retail order either, how did 14 million FTDs end up being covered? But on top of that, if they bought 14 million shares in a single day and every single transaction was a buy order, how did the price of APE fall by 4.8%? Now you may say, Tom, because of T+2, institutions could have bought these shares on the 24th of August, the 25th of August and the 26th of August, but only reported those transactions on the 26th, thereby only impacting the FTDs on the 26th and not the days prior. Therefore, these 14 million FTDs would have been bought or covered on these 3 individual trading days where there was over 70 million shares traded. But don't forget, APE is supposed to be traded on a T+0 basis per Adam Aaron's instructions, and therefore any FTDs that are being covered should be bought and reported on the same day. Therefore, if 14 million FTDs have been covered, 14 million shares should have been bought the exact same day on a T+0 basis. Again, this just shows even more evidence of APE manipulation and gives Adam Aaron more factual and identifiable proof. But again, it's not just these brokers who are committing crimes by stealing our shares and selling an unlimited number of shares, it's also the SEC that's ignoring these crime reports. This is a screenshot from Dave Lauer that says Grassley learned that over the past decade, FINRA had referred 19 complaints about suspicious trades at SAC Capital to federal regulators. He said, curious to see how many of these referrals had actually been looked into, Grassley wrote to the SEC on May 24th. And 2 weeks later, the SEC replied saying, we generally do not comment on the status of investigations of related referrals, and in turn, we are not providing information concerning the specific FINRA referrals that you identified. And Grassley later found out from FINRA that they had actually referred 65 cases about SAC Capital to the SEC, making the lack of serious investigations even more inexplainable. Grassley was contacted by somebody at the SEC referring to 3 separate SEC investigations into SAC Capital, but interestingly, all 3 of these cases were closed by the SEC and the records apparently destroyed. So it seems like not only does the SEC ignore reports of insider trading and market abuse, but they also destroy evidence of ongoing investigations. But finally, PK Lance tweeted this video showing the Department of Justice will be stepping up their investigations and handing out more severe punishments as the SEC isn't doing its job. As the SEC isn't doing enough, the Department of Justice will be taking over and they will be handing out more severe punishments.
Official at the Department of Justice and people who are working inside American companies or contemplating doing some wrongdoing might want to pay attention here because they are changing a lot of internal rules over the Department of Justice. We're going to get an announcement this evening about a crackdown on corporate crime enforcement inside the Department of Justice. They're trying to change the situation where companies have historically often been able to simply pay a fine, get a non-prosecution agreement, and move on in the case of corporate fraud. Now the DOJ says they want to go after individual executives inside these companies. They want to go after executive compensation clawbacks. They want to incentivize companies to turn over the names of individual executives who were responsible for the fraud here. And they're trying to make sure that these non-prosecution agreements don't happen again and again and again. They're sending a message to corporate America here saying that if you have a non-prosecution agreement and you commit more fraud, do not expect to come back to the Department of Justice and be able to negotiate another one. The next one will likely be a guilty plea. So a whole host of changes here from the Department of Justice. All of this expected to be announced at 5:30 this evening by the Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco in a speech in New York. Scott, just a preview of what's coming.
So that there is brilliant news. No longer will these funds or institutions be able to pay the fine without admitting liability. We've seen in tons and tons of these legal cases impacting Citadel or any of these major banks that more often than not they pay a fine without admitting any wrongdoing. Now obviously paying the fine in the first place shows they know that they're guilty, but because they're not admitting they're guilty, they're just paying the fine, everything gets brushed under the rug. This is effectively these non-prosecution agreements that this news reporter is talking about, but he's saying the Department of Justice is saying no more to these non-prosecution agreements. He's basically saying that on the first occasion these funds may still get their fine, but on the second occasion, if it happens again, there's going to be a much more severe punishment. Now obviously all of these institutions like Citadel and like these major banks are already way past their first strike, and therefore when the Department of Justice introduces these new regulations, there will be massive crackdowns on all of these institutions, including Citadel. Basically, as soon as these institutions like Citadel are caught committing more fraud, especially as they've committed fraud hundreds of times in the past, as soon as they're caught doing it again, these executives will be going to jail. But guys, be sure to let me know what you think down in the comments below. And as always guys, be sure to ding that notification bell, because that way you'll be alerted when I upload a new video. Cheers.